Welcome to A Shot in the Arm podcast. I'm your host, Ben Plumley, and we're coming to you from Kigali, Rwanda for the International AIDS Society Scientific Conference. And I am joined by my usual co-hostess with the mostess, Yvette Raphael. Hey, Yvette, how are you doing?
Hi, Ben. How are you? Did you eventually get here?
Took quite a while to get here through most of Africa. We feel we've done a really Pan-African trip. So here we are, AIDS conference in Kigali. I hear you had quite the experience taking over the stage last night. Who did you upstage first up?
It was not really upstaging. It's just really community talking about some of the struggles that we have since the executive orders, and just how we feel people are pretending, things are not going as smooth as we are going, but it's not smooth. Some people lost their jobs. Some people are being erased. So I just thought that was a perfect space to remind us that we come a long way and we should not sell each other out.
Absolutely. And certainly as I was registering for the conference this morning, and sort of being stopped every 50 yards or so, people were saying, "Oh, did you see Yvette speak last night? Was she on the agenda?" But yeah, excellent. Well, one of the reasons, besides obviously you and I getting together for this podcast, is sort of a regular, I suppose, catch up with our friends at Gilead Sciences. And it's been quite the year for Gilead, particularly with finally the approval in the United States of Lenacapavir for HIV prevention. And I'm absolutely thrilled that we are joined by Dr. Alex Kintu, who is the Director of Clinical Development Virology at the company. Alex, a belated welcome to A Shot in the Arm podcast.
Thank you, Ben, and thanks, Yvette, and great to be here.
It's really terrific. Absolutely wonderful to have you here. For our listeners and viewers who may not have met you or heard of you before, what's your story? How long have you been working in the HIV field, and how did you get to be at Gilead?
Well, I'm a Ugandan trained and born physician. I have been working in HIV for about 20 years now. I was involved in the early rollout of PEPFAR projects in Uganda, set up 2 rural clinics in the west of Uganda, and then thereafterwards worked on the Partners PrEP trial, which got Truvada approved for PrEP, as you might know. And then thereafter moved to the US for school, graduate school, then moved to Gilead about 5 years ago, where I've spent most of my time there working on the HIV prevention team, particularly Lena for PrEP team.
Well, an absolutely fascinating historical time for you to be working at the company. So to my surprise, I lost a bet against Mitchell Warren in that I was convinced there was no way that the FDA, given all of its upheavals and staff losses, would be able to review and then make a decision about the approval of Lenacapavir for PrEP by mid-June. But that's exactly what it did. So, Mitch, your 25 cents is winging its way to you. So give us the lowdown. What was the approval about, and particularly what happens next? What happens next, particularly as it relates to access to medicines? What has the company decided and committed to?
Yeah. As you might know, right after the second pivotal trial Purpose 2 read out, we announced that we were working with 6 generic companies to give them licenses, royalty-free licenses to manufacture Len and supply it to 120 low and middle-income countries. When you come to think about it, that's soon after Purpose 2, which means that we began these discussions way before then. Since then, we've also submitted for approval in the EU, and the EU made for all that will help accelerate approval in those countries that I mentioned. And more recently, earlier this month, we announced plans for Gilead to supply Len up to 2 million doses for about 3 years, while the generic companies come up to speed to supply what's required. So really exciting. Our goal is to get Len, as one of my friends said, into warm bodies as soon as possible. The main point here is that once approval is completed in a setting where people who need and want PrEP drug supply is there as soon as possible. So we look forward. To your point, we're grateful for the speed at which the FDA reviewed our package. When you come to think about it, Purpose 1 read out on June 18th last year, and the FDA approval was received on about June 18th this year, so less than a year, and less than probably 9 months since Purpose 2 read out. So we're really grateful for all the partners, whether it's Global Fund or FDA and other colleagues we're working with, the effort and the commitment that different partners have put in to approve the drug, but also to make sure that we move towards equitable access.
Brilliant. And thank you for that update. And Yvette, I guess, hot off the heels of being one of the breakthrough awardees of the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, for your role as chairing the Global Accountability Board that helped in the clinical trial design and support of Purpose, particularly Purpose 2. What's next for you guys? For you ladies, I should say.
Yes, definitely. Thanks so much, Ben. And just to bring us to the fact that it was in 2019 in Kigali where we first met with Gilead to talk about this, this innovation. And we also at that time had lots of demands. But what's next for us is really to follow. So we are about 14 women in 7 countries, is to follow the regulatory process in our countries to make sure that we support Gilead's, filing into our regulatory authorities. This morning, I think it was Peggy Sisa that wrote about South Africa and SAPRA, and my colleagues already say, but why does SAPRA look surprised? Do we have to remind them what Len is? It is at that speed that communities, that women, the African Women Accountability Board is committed to ensure that with the same speed that the FDA approved, that our regulatory authorities in country also approve. I don't know much about the Poisons Board in Kenya, but yes, we will definitely have some coordinated voice and some coordinated advocacy to ensure that we also help Gilead in our countries. We are excited about the licenses, the generic licenses, and just how committed Gilead is to make sure that it gets into the hands of people who need it the most by 2025 next year, right? Mid-year next year. 2026, sorry.
Yeah. I think credit to different parties. Yesterday, the WHO released the guidelines. We've had discussions with them. I'm sure SAPRA also hopefully soon, come up with something that will at least provide more information to the groups. But looking forward, as we look into the EMA for all, that will cover a lot of the African countries so that we don't have to go to every single country that needs it. So once we get the WHO pre-qualification after the EMA for all approval, that will expedite the approvals in the local countries. And I know I've heard from colleagues here and former collaborators that their countries are also looking at, guidelines and also implementation.
It's worth unpacking this because there was a time in history where FDA approval was the thing that really kick-started national approvals. And if I go back in my long history in this movement, that was particularly the case with Tibotec's drug, Darunavir, the protease inhibitor. Remember protease inhibitors?
Yes.
Yep. But in this instance, you're describing a process where basically it's the European Medicines Agency that really kickstarts the local approvals. And is that countries looking to the EMA itself, or are they looking at WHO pre-qualification and that itself piggybacking off the EMA approval?
Yeah, well, I can't speak to the specifics of how the process works, but I know my understanding is that there are rapporteurs from the low and middle income countries that will be involved in the EMA process. But the idea is that was first used during, I think, the COVID-19 outbreak in getting approvals, is to get some sort of concerted effort to reduce the red tape of getting things done. Like, you don't need 20 African countries to review, or you don't need 15 European countries to review. So again, in partnership with the WHO and the EU to accelerate that process of getting approvals.
Now, one of our listeners actually wrote a while ago saying, great that you're talking about all of these innovations, but you constantly forget that those of us that perhaps aren't in the field don't necessarily fully understand what they are and why they're so important. So maybe it's worth, Alex, just explaining what Lenacapavir is, its both its mode of action, but its mode of delivery, and why, for people like Yvette and myself, it is just so important.
So Lenacapavir, which I sometimes call Len, is a capsid inhibitor.
Yeah.
The capsid is like an envelope around the virus that is involved in the replication or the way the virus multiplies. So Len blocks that multiplication process at 3 steps. And basically, if the virus cannot multiplicate or divide and make more copies, then that means that it cannot, someone not acquire HIV. So imagine someone who has enough Len in their body, in their bloodstream, virus comes in, it gets in touch with Len, virus can't divide, the virus in the body that is there dies off, so person is protected. I like using the analogy of contraception. Someone has whatever contraceptive they have in their bloodstream, and for some reason that the drug prevents any kind of fertilization or any kind of implantation. I like the analogy because many people will relate to contraception more than they will with the dynamics of viral replication.
And it's an interesting one, given that the mode of delivery is an injectable.
Yeah.
And I guess it's the second injectable on the market. But there are things that are really very different about it, right? In terms of where the shot in the wherever it is goes. But also the frequency.
Yeah.
So the one unique thing it has is that it's not very soluble. And as you might know, it took us about, 14 years from the first experiments to getting it to a human to study it. Part of that process was trying to figure out exactly how you can get it to the bloodstream. But the disadvantage of not being soluble became an advantage in that slow release actually comes that long-acting property. So the currently available option as an injectable is a subcutaneous injection, which means you put it in the fat just under the skin. And then over time, in the next 6 months, it dissolves slowly into the bloodstream. And then after 26 weeks, if needed, you'd give a second dose.
Yeah. But I think, Alex, what we also keep forgetting when we talk about this is that oral lead-in that actually gives you the 100% within the 24 hours or the second day.
I can speak to that. So if you do not take day 1 and day 2 doses, or if you just take day 1 and the injection, it takes you about 3 weeks to get what we think is the protective level. But if you take your day one dose, which are 2 pills, and then take your 2 pills on the second day, by the end of the second day, you actually achieve the required protective level. Yeah. So it's oral loading. It sort of gives it a bump, like a nudge to get you to what you need in your body.
Yeah, and also you don't have to have that. Sorry, Ben.
I was going to say no.
And you sort of don't have to have that oral lead-in ever again if you take your injections on time, right?
Exactly. So there is a grace period. So we tell people to, or what we studied, come in within 26 weeks. Okay. So if you come within 26 weeks, you don't need to reload. You have a grace period of 2 weeks, up to 28 weeks. So after 28 weeks, you don't need to reload. You'd just give the next 2 injection and person goes home. But if that person is late beyond 28 weeks, then you have to reload again on day 1 and day 2.
Oh.
No, I think this is fascinating because we automatically assumed, it's a neat injection and off you go. And it's important to understand the loading, but that 2-day rather than a week-long or multi-week-long loading is really important. And why should you apologize to me for jumping in with questions?
I think it's also important that we understand that the people who talk to also want to understand the real science. Yeah. And I think our podcast should be able to educate people to understand. They would listen and get just from this conversation, understand just
great
how
questions.
important.
I think part of implementation will require a lot of education, a lot to normalize how it's used so that, a friend can someone can tell her friend, oh, this is what they say, or ask their doctors or their providers these questions.
And the infamous nodule.
Yeah.
Because, if you look at it very simplistically, wow, an injection twice a year. Wow, this is a vaccine. Well, it's not quite, but it's getting us into implementation territory that is very similar, including, therefore, all of the mis and disinformation that groups like the Global Listening Project, groups like us, have been looking at and are struggling to address and overcome. And I guess, for both of you, really, what the strategy then is going forward, both in terms of an additional clinical strategy for Lenacapavir, but also, Yvette, how we go about making sure that people are fully informed about what this is and what it is not.
Yes, and especially young people. I think everybody is excited that young people will take this up as an option, but we also need to have them have enough knowledge so that they understand, just like you said, the 28 weeks. Somebody really, if they do not know, they think the 26 weeks, if I skip it, I am out of the program. I am out of, I might just have to start earlier, over again. So that is the kind of engagement that the Accountability Board is looking at, getting our communities and really getting young people to take up HIV prevention because it's what they need and not just necessarily the programs.
Yeah, I think I've been pleasantly surprised by the excitement about Len. I was also kind of disappointed or bummed about how little people knew about PrEP. I have friends I grew up with who you'd consider well-educated, but they had no idea about what PrEP was. We've made strides from the 90s with lots of mortality. You can now live positively and with HIV. But I was surprised that to talk to a few friends a few months ago before the Prime Purpose One readout, and they didn't know what PrEP was. These are college graduates, But now I've also been pleasantly surprised how in my country, it's making, front news, on social media. People are talking about it. My mom or my aunt is asking me whether it's a vaccine or, things like that. I'm just really looking forward and hopeful really that, for once at least, there will be normalization of people using PrEP without stigma or anything like that, but also that the uptake picks up for injectables and all the other options that are available for both men and women.
Yes, but it's also exciting because Uganda was one of the countries where this was tested in, and it also shows the hard work of the accountability board. So I'm going to give ourselves a pat on the back because women like Lillian Moreko, Ruth, Shakira Moanje, and Bridget are really community women who ensure that the community understands this commodity. And those women that you've mentioned can just also be messengers and explain to their peers and their community what PrEP is. We hope to make a big change with Lenacapavir, but we also need to understand people need to know about these products to demand for them and for the uptake that we want to see.
That's correct. Just like the starting with Kigali leading into the conduct of the trial where, the Yvette's under Yvette's leadership with the Global Community Accountability Group, we had to conduct the trials in a certain way. So it wasn't like advice at the beginning, but even during the conduct of the study. As we're thinking about implementation, it will be critical that the local ministries and everyone involved in the implementation work listens to the community, because it has been really, really helpful. We innovated because of the advice. Sometimes had difficult talks with Yvette and other folks, but if we don't listen to the voices of the community on the way we do things, and we think it will be a top-down or some sort of like prescriptive approach, it might not go well.
And there's an argument that says that the warm glow, if you like, of Lenacapavir is actually very beneficial to the broader range of prevention options. As you rightly say, Alex, the awareness of pre-exposure prophylaxis, the lack of awareness is actually pretty shocking, precisely in those age groups and populations where it would be most relevant. But there is a bittersweetness to all of this, isn't there? And I know there's a limit, Alex, to what you can say about this, but Yvette, you and I can be absolutely direct about it. Here we are looking at the kind of technological biomedical innovation that we have wanted, since the start of the epidemic.
Yeah.
And we're coming at this at a time when countries are having to make some really, really tough decisions about prioritization. Read for that, rationing. And in a world where condoms and oral PrEP are, on the face of it, short-term wise, very, very affordable as commodities, what do we do to help health policymakers understand the benefit of a long-term investment in a technology like Lenacapavir?
I think, Ben, at a time like this, we've passed all of the questions around not only price, but understanding that the HIV field is ready for a longer acting, commodity. Also the fact that the funds are also so limited. A 2-yearly can really might be a little bit cheaper than giving somebody, and not cheaper on the price size. And this is where me and Lillian are saying that just knowing that a woman would only have to come to the clinic twice.
Yep.
Not so many times, and that would help. Knowing that a woman does not have to worry about a daily intake of something. Also, it comes at a price. So this comes at a price. We demand for Gilead to bring down the price significantly of what we know. Tell us what the price is. But importantly is we also need to know there's the flip side of this price question. Is that meanwhile, while we're getting the price down, while we're getting people to understand, my biggest fear is that we get the SIF donation and nobody takes it up. And this is my biggest fear. I would like to really see a lot more effort, a lot more political leadership, a lot more education to young people who would need this, so that it is not stigmatized. And that is also another fear that we have.
Now, you mentioned the SIF donation. That is the foundation, SIF, the Children's Investment Fund.
Yes,
we'll put the right name in the show notes. SIF.
Yeah.
There we go. But, you know, the other aspect of this, and this is something you and I have always argued with policymakers about, is the cost of HIV prevention is not one condom, is not one ABC session. It is a long-term investment with messaging being constantly created and recreated, with people coming in for clinical visits, for people getting regular HIV tests. All of this costs. And what we have to do is make sure that people don't see this as an excuse not to invest in prevention. In fact, in many ways, it may well help drive a better allocation of resourcing into prevention.
Exactly. It's not a sunk cost. Like, you spend now, but you will prevent future expenses. Like, we can't keep relying on Global Fund for the rest of our lives to supplement our budgets. I'll give you an example. I did medical school when there's no ART in Africa. Graduated about the time of PEPFAR. My graduating class, about 80 or 90% of us went into HIV treatment, setting up clinics. At that time, it was doctors prescribing. With soon afterwards learned that actually you could do, nurses can prescribe and manage HIV to some extent, So I'm optimistic. Yes, it's tough. The road ahead is very unclear given the funding cuts and everything. But I think we've made incremental, small steps. We'll wait to see what happens when these access and when the approvals come in. But I'm optimistic that that this excitement that we're seeing will be reflected hopefully in implementation.
Yeah.
And that's why the work of the Accountability Board is so important, because the focus is not, say, on the Europeans or the WHO, but on countries.
Yes, on countries, as well as getting the next cadre of leadership to understand HIV prevention. We have young people who are really committed to ensuring that their peers understand what this would mean. And we also need to understand young people think very differently. And one of the things we did is to have HIV prevention influencers, because really we need to talk about the elephant in the room. If young people don't take up this, who are we going to give it to? Old people? No, we have to make this cool enough so that you can see the vibrancy that we saw at 1:00 and between 12 and 1 at the United Board, where young people are really excited about HIV prevention. We cannot use the same old story, Yvette and Lillian crying about our kids not getting HIV. We need to get with the program and have these young people not only at the meeting tables, but let them teach us how they want to influence each other and make it cool.
It's not the meeting tables anymore, is it? I mean, it's TikTok, it's Insta, it's Reels.
But make HIV prevention cool.
Yeah.
It should be a cool thing to be on a prevention method. And we need to crack that with them.
And even though we are, the three of us, possibly the most attractive and cool proponents of the HIV movement, our effectiveness in communicating and reaching young people is probably limited. But look, there's something I want to ask, which sort of takes us sort of to an even higher level. Alex, you mentioned that you graduated as a physician at the start of PEPFAR, so that's the early 2000s. Yvette, your activism was really kicking off in the early 2000s, and my first major initiative as the executive director of the Global Business Coalition was also in the 2000s. So our careers, our lives have been driven by HIV. And I just wonder, how do you feel now? Are you not tired? Do you not do you feel that we will be able to get this over the goalpost, end HIV, end AIDS is a public health crisis. You see, I say end AIDS, but I really mean end HIV is a public health crisis.
I'm really, really hopeful. Like for the first time, and I think it's the buzz that has come with Learn for PrEP, that little light at the end of the tunnel is sort of getting brighter. One of my senior leadership says it several times that he's worked on PrEP for a long time and he would love to work on something else. So I also envision, as a scientist, you hope that you're part of something that changes the world. And I hope that will be a time where I can look back and say, yes, we did it. And then we've moved on and are now looking at things like maybe eradicating malaria in Africa or something like that. But I'm hopeful that something positive will come out of this.
I definitely will never get tired until there is an end to HIV and AIDS. But I will tell you is if the executive orders is not a reminder for us to say, we really made a commitment for 2030. We didn't make a commitment to say we will end AIDS when there is funding.
Yeah.
So my suggestion really is for us to use this next 5 years to really, really talk about that. How are we going to do things differently in the current situation where funding is not in abundance, where we have breakthroughs like Lenacapavir, where we have so much options available? What do we prioritize? So for me, it's really in the next 5 years, we need to, I say we need to give young people something to say, this is the work that we've done for 30 years. I almost felt like when the executive orders came in, we were about to give up. I could not phone anybody. Nobody was optimistic. I was the only happy one because I won the award. But everybody was not ready to talk. They were just so tired. But that energy is up again because now we're talking FDA approval, we're talking in-country approvals, we're talking EMA, medicines for all approvals, which will give us that final kick.
And we're talking about real country leadership. I mean, I'm really excited by the work of the HIV Leadership Forum concretely to address what real country ownership means and how countries get there. And although there are going to be tough decisions to be made, without a shadow of a doubt, innovations like Lenacapavir are going to have to be central to that because they give us the mechanism to make dramatic changes in the trajectory of the epidemic, which, business as usual wouldn't allow us. So in a funny way, I wouldn't have done it this way. And the suddenness of it feels entirely inappropriate, to put it mildly, but there is a value in shifting the donor and the recipient relationship, which I think is really very, very exciting for the moment.
Yep. Yeah, we have to be more intentional in the things we do, whether it's industry partners, but also governments have to be, it's like when you have a pie, limited resource, you have to be very careful the way you use it. So hopefully this will be a nudge for all of us to think more critically the way we do things.
In a total failure on our part, if Lenacapavir cannot be implemented and taken up, it would be a total failure on our part. This is a twice-a-year injectable, and if we fail, I'll be sad.
Yeah.
Well, in a sense, shame on us, right?
Yeah, that was my slogan last night. So you did listen to my speech.
Well, shame. I heard a number of things that you said, some of which we can't repeat here. But yeah. Well, look, we're coming up to the top of the hour. Are there things that we have missed? Things that you think the listeners and viewers would find useful both about Lenacapavir, but also the activities that you guys are up to this week in Kigali that we haven't covered?
No, I think from our side as the accountability board is just engaging as much as possible some of our country leadership that's in the country. The closing session, as much as you say, was very dramatic, but there is a example when Linda Gale finished her speech.
That's Linda Gale Becker.
Yes, LGB. Yeah. LGB finished her speech yesterday. The Nairobi leadership that was here was so shocked. They called a meeting, an emergency meeting, and say, tell us the reality. Where don't we have money? What do we have money for? Because we don't want to go back there. And that only means that we remember the pain. We remember the funerals. We remember the deaths. We remember just how painful it was. And with Lenacapavir, our young people will not get HIV. So we need to insist on having those resources available, and top of it is community. We are the ones who knows where the solution is. Show me a problem that we cannot solve.
Yeah, it's just entirely agree. And speaking of LGB and young people, I just wanted to highlight some of the presentations of Len here. So we have, for the first time, as you might know, a prevention option approved with that allows pregnant women to access it once the drug has been approved. And that, again, thanks to the Yvette and all the community advocates that told us, include pregnant women. So we shall present full results for participants who became pregnant, who were lactating, showing that Len can safely be used in pregnancy. Then again, speaking of young people, we shall present data on the safety and the efficacy and showing that Len levels in young people match well with those of adults and they can safely use it. We also have data presenting data on participants' voices, their perceptions on their preferences of using Len. At the end of the randomized blended phase, we offered participants either to continue taking Len or to go on to oral PrEP, or I'm tired of the study, I want to go. I'm happy to say for both studies, 95% of those participants chose to continue taking Len. And the reason was that it's convenient. I can live a burdensome-free life. So we have posters on this from Purpose One, where women expressed why they choose Len. And I think that's sort of like a preamble to what, when we implement, why people might choose a 6-monthly injectable over other options.
Well, thank you both very much. And this has been a really wonderful and inspiring update, notwithstanding perhaps a bit of the doom and gloom that's surrounding the AIDS movement at the moment. Well, all the best for the rest of the conference. And I know we'll be seeing each other again in a few podcasts coming up.
Yes.
Thank you both. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks, as always, to my co-host, Yvette Raphael, keeping it real. Thanks also to Alex Kintu from Gilead Sciences. Thanks to the production team here in Kigali, led by our fearless director and producer, Eric Espera of A Shot in the Arm Media. And finally, a big thanks to you. Now, you know what to do. Subscribe, give us 5 stars wherever you download your audio podcasts, and go onto our YouTube channel. Again, subscribe, like the channel, and hit that notification button so that you can be updated on when fascinating new episodes like this one go live. So with that, have a great day and a safe day, everyone.